If you struggle to improve your grade in GCSE Chemistry, this video is for you. In year 10 I was bang average in my chemistry class, being stuck on only grades 4 and 5, even when I tried hard in end of year mocks. But over the course of year 11 I started to implement these core tips, a few of which no one really talks about. That took me to a grade 9 by the time I finished my GCSEs at the end of year 11, and I ended up getting the sixth form scholarship for chemistry the next year. And in this video I've condensed them for you all to take away and achieve your best grade possible, with action steps you can easily do. This first one is critical, and it was complete luck for me, so you need to learn from me and actually take action to make sure you don't end up in the same rut as everyone else. During year 10 chemistry, I chose to sit next to my best friend, of course, as everyone else does. We'll call him Alex. We went into chemistry after years 7, 8 and 9, knowing that this was a hard subject, and accepted that we probably weren't going to get the best grades by the end of it. And with that in mind, it gave us an excuse to not listen in class and joke and mess around the whole time, doing things like turning on the laptops and spraying each other. You know how it is. And of course, when year 10 mocks came around, I was stuck on the same old grade 5 in chemistry, and I wondered why I wasn't making any progress. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're in the same boat. Then September year 11 came by, and my chemistry teacher, who was usually really nice and never seemed to have a problem with anyone, sternly told me to move to a different seat, as if I'd done something wrong. I was moved to an empty seat next to a guy who's known to be one of the smartest in the class, with 2 other guys behind us who were also known to be some of the smartest in the class. All of these guys were consistently achieving grades 7s, 8s and 9s in all their subjects, including chemistry. But I didn't really know them very well, so I couldn't have as much fun as I would with Alex. So I wasn't too happy about the situation, because it meant I'd have to sit through hours of chemistry without having anything to do. But that decision was critical in the grade that I got at the end of year 11, because it forced me to listen much more deeply in lesson, because what else could I do? And any time there was a principle that I struggled to understand, which there was a lot of, it was okay, because I was surrounded by people that got it easily. Even if I felt too stupid to ask for help, I was still able to overhear their conversations about the subject, allowing me to subconsciously take in information from people who had a much greater understanding. And when I did ask for help, my understanding of the subject came very quickly, because it was almost like I had my own group of personal tutors. And very soon I began to pick up my knowledge and confidence in the subject, and was able to figure out answers to questions myself, resulting in me being able to check with them if they had the same answers. And if I or someone else didn't, as a group would walk through the process to see who got the right answer, allowing us to pick out our mistakes and fine-tune our technique, all alongside high achievers. And so my grades improved at a drastic pace, and I started to adopt the same information processing and problem-solving skills as these high-grade students. And this all happened within a matter of weeks. The action step here is to find a seat in your class where you're surrounded by, or at least close to, high achievers in chemistry, and actually move to that seat. It might mean moving away from your friends, but that's just a sacrifice you have to make, and I promise you, it will not ruin your friendship. And if it does, well, then realistically they probably weren't very good friends anyway. If you can't find a seat because everywhere in your class is full, then just try to talk to those high grade students after the lessons and hear how they understood the concepts, and ask them any questions you're unsure of, and then gradually start to build up to the point where you can explain the concepts to them, and each compare your different viewpoints and pick out any misconceptions. It might feel a bit awkward in the moment, but what's more important, getting away from a bit of discomfort or achieving your best grade possible. My next tip is to actually try an end of topic test, and this means getting past the idea that tests earlier on in the course don't matter, because they do. And that meant having to accept the fact that I had to do the hard work now, even though I didn't really feel like it. Of course, as I started to actually try an end of topic test and revise hard beforehand, my performance in them would gradually start to improve. Not only did this mean that when I came back to topics during GCSE exam period that I had already gone over, they stuck in my long-term memory stronger with a much deeper understanding, but it also built my confidence and self-belief that I was able to consistently achieve good grades. And that self-belief is hugely important, because it results in you kind of manifesting those good grades into reality. Not because you're literally visioning them into reality, but because you genuinely believe you can achieve that grade. And so it subconsciously forces you to do the work that's required to get the grade you want, because you won't get the grade that you know you genuinely can achieve. But as you can expect, it wasn't good grades the whole time for me. There were ups and downs, of course, as there always are. But the consistent achievement of good grades with the occasional drop meant that I developed a strong gauge of the grade that I achieved in the test, far before I'd received the actual mark. And so I could clearly identify early on what my weak points were for specific topics, when they were applied to an actual exam style context, as well as other external factors that would impact my score, with the mains being a lack of revision on certain topics, or just plain and simple a lack of sleep. This meant that when it came to exam period, I had a good idea of the almost exact topics and principles that I was weaker on during an actual exam, and so I could focus my revision on these to further improve my grades. You could just wait for the marked version back, but usually that's a week or more later than doing the actual paper, which means that the topics are much less fresh in your mind, and so you lack clarity on the insight into your weak points. It also means that these weak points are not as strongly reinforced as for those who already had a good idea of them, because they have seen twice that those are the areas where more work is needed. And remember, grade boundaries are set according to the performance of all students. And so whether you like it or not, it is a competition. And so you're already a step behind those who have an insight before receiving the actual mark if you don't do this. That action step here is pretty self-explanatory. Just ensure that for each end of topic test, to the best of your ability, you revise to the point where you know everything and you have a good understanding of it all. My next tip is practice as much as possible. That includes exam practice, as for all subjects. But in terms of content revision, chemistry is like no other subject. And this is something that people don't talk about. In chemistry, to get your best grade possible, you have to do more practice than just doing the exam questions. Anytime you learn a new principle in chemistry, you can't just leave it at that like you would for other subjects and just wait to do practice with exam questions. You need to create various different contexts in your head and practice applying that principle to each of them. Or maybe these different contexts exist in your textbook, but often there isn't enough of these. For example, if you learn how to give an ionic equation, you should practice creating ionic equations for various different reactions, like hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide, or maybe ammonia and sulfuric acid, or calcium carbonate and nitric acid. And if you're good, you'll realize these all have the same ionic equation. And then you can maybe progress to doing, I don't know, the half equations for each of these. Another method would be to draw processes or principles out. This is especially useful for things like bonding or electrolysis because it allows you to easily visualize the process. This is extremely useful if you're a visual learner. Again, the action step here is obvious. Make sure that during your revision, don't worry about during your lesson because you won't necessarily have time. You practice using any principles you initially found a bit difficult to understand in new contexts and practice drawing them out too where possible. And that leads on to my next point, visualizing processes. For those of you who aren't visual learners, if you aren't interested, you can just skip to the next point in the video. But for those of you who are, implementing this tip into your GCSE game will take it to a whole new level. Anytime you're learning a new process in lesson, it's almost vital that you actively try and visualize the process. Use whatever you need to help you, whether that means making notes or drawing quick diagrams, just whatever you can do to clearly visualize the process. Because once you can visualize it, you understand it. It's as simple as that. That also means that when you can't understand the process, it's likely because you can't visualize it. And that won't be because you can't visualize the entire process at all, but it'll be that there's a few specific parts that don't visually make sense to you. So if you take time to sit down and think through the process, for example, electrolysis, and draw out each step, as we said before through practice, you'll be able to pick out those parts that you can't visualize. And then you need to take action to make sure you can by either watching a video or asking your teacher or whatever works for you. This will ensure that you can understand almost every process in chemistry. And that's the key to top grades in chemistry, understanding. The action step here is to visualize any new processes you come across during lesson and to ensure that any aspects you cannot visualize are fixed through asking your teacher or watching videos, or like I said before, just whatever works for you. And then to use that visualization when you come into contact with that same process in the future. And my final point is sleep. I cannot emphasize the importance of sleep enough. I know, it's very tempting to stay up late on a school night, playing video games or watching Netflix after you've completed your homework or any work that you needed to do during the evening, and end up getting only 4, 5 or 6 hours of sleep consistently. Yet every school morning you wake up and think, oh, I really need to get an early night tonight. And if that sounds like you, make sure you listen to this tip. You should ideally be getting at least 8 hours of sleep every night. And some of you, probably a lot of you, because you're teenagers, will require even more. It's actually been found that a lack of sleep can reduce learning ability by up to 40%. So can you imagine the kind of impact that that's having on your ability to understand chemistry concepts, or even worse, on your performance during exams? And no, 8 hours of sleep does not mean going to bed at 10 and waking up at 6. A good night of sleep is viewed as being asleep for 80% of the time you're in bed. You need to be in bed for 10 hours to get the 8 hours of sleep. And that's only when you have a good night of sleep. So only on those good nights, let alone on the nights where you're waking up multiple times or just sleeping lightly. Several poor nights of sleep would have a huge impact on my performance on end of topic tests during both GCSEs and A-levels, and would always mean I'd drop at least 1 grade. This needs to be a priority for you if not already and you're looking to achieve high grades. It could very easily be the difference between a grade 5 and a grade 7, or maybe a grade 6 and a grade 8. This doesn't mean that if you have 1 poor night of sleep, your grades will be impacted drastically. So if every now and then for whatever reason you can't sleep, you don't need to stress. You just need to make sure that sleep is a priority and that you consistently have good quality sleep. Some easy to implement actionable steps to improve your sleep I'll give you are: number 1, going to bed on time to give yourself enough sleep. So that probably means being in bed for 9 to 10 hours. Number 2 is consistently going to bed at the same or similar time, around plus minus 1 hour. And yes, even on weekends. The third one is avoiding screens 30 minutes before bed. And that should be more, but we'll say 30 minutes so that it's realistically achievable and you're actually motivated to do it. And trust me, I know. It's very easy and very, very tempting to go on your phone or go on your laptop to watch something or text your friends just before you go into sleep. Fourth one is some kind of relaxation activity before you go to sleep. For example, something that I would recommend is reading, and we'll say do that for at least 10 minutes. Fifth one is avoiding work or revision about 1 hour before bed. You don't want to be in that work mode whilst you're trying to get to sleep. And the sixth and final one is a dark room. Try to make sure that your curtains are closed, your bedroom door is shut, all the lights are turned off, no lamps, and just that the room is as dark as possible. I know that a lot of what I've said in this video may sound boring and stop you from having as much fun as normally, but these are sacrifices that you just have to have the strength to make to achieve your best grade possible. This is a competition, and there will be other students out there already doing all of these tips and more. So you cannot expect to achieve top grades whilst not doing any of these. Remember, understanding is the key.